The question was meant to be heartwarming. Steve Harvey had asked it hundreds of times before, usually getting answers filled with pride, admiration, and family love. "Captain Mitchell, tell me, are you proud of your father?" What 28-year-old Captain Jake Mitchell said next would stop Family Feud dead in its tracks and shatter the silence around one of the military's most difficult conversations. "Mr. Harvey, my father is a decorated war hero. He saved hundreds of lives, led soldiers through impossible situations, and earned more medals than I can count." Steve smiled, expecting the answer to continue with typical father-son pride. Instead, Jake's voice broke as he continued. "But I can't look him in the eye anymore because I'm gay, and I'm too much of a coward to tell the bravest man I know." The studio fell into the kind of silence that makes people question whether time has stopped moving. 58-year-old General Thomas Mitchell, decorated veteran of 3 wars and recipient of the Medal of Honor, stood frozen at the family podium, staring at his son with an expression that cycled through shock, confusion, and something that looked like heartbreak. "Jake," he whispered, his voice barely audible even with the microphone, "what did you just say?" It started as another Monday afternoon taping in Atlanta. The Mitchell family from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, faced off against the Garcia family from San Antonio, Texas. General Thomas Mitchell was exactly the kind of person who commanded respect simply by walking into a room. Even in civilian clothes, his military bearing was unmistakable. Straight spine, measured movements, eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. But there was something else about him that Steve Harvey noticed immediately. The way he looked at his son Jake with unconditional pride, the gentle way he corrected Jake's posture with a father's love rather than a commander's authority. Captain Jake Mitchell stood beside his father at the family podium, and everything about their interaction suggested a close, respectful relationship. Jake kept glancing at his father with an expression that held both admiration and something else. Something that looked like longing, like someone who desperately wanted to share something but couldn't find the courage. During family introductions, Steve had been immediately impressed by their military credentials. "And who do we have here?" Steve had asked, approaching their podium with his trademark warmth. "I'm General Thomas Mitchell, United States Army, retired. This is my son, Captain Jake Mitchell, currently serving with the 82nd Airborne. General and Captain, we've got military royalty in the house. How long have you both been serving?" General Mitchell had stood even straighter, if that was possible. 35 years for me, sir. Jake here is following in the family tradition with 8 years of distinguished service." Jake had smiled, but Steve noticed something forced about it, like someone performing happiness rather than feeling it. "That's incredible. Must make you proud, General, having your son follow in your footsteps." "Proudest moment of my life was when Jake earned his commission," General Mitchell had replied without hesitation. Jake had looked at his father then, and Steve caught an expression that didn't match the pride in the general's voice. It was the look of someone carrying a secret that felt like a betrayal. Now, 4 rounds into the game, that moment was about to explode into something that would challenge everything both men thought they knew about courage, honor, and love. The Mitchell family was doing well, leading by 25 points heading into the final round. Steve was in his element, making jokes about Grandmother Mitchell's surprisingly strategic thinking and Uncle Robert's tendency to give military precise answers to simple questions. The category was things that make you proud of your family. It was Jake's turn at the podium. He had stepped forward with the same military bearing as his father, but there was a tremor in his hands that suggested internal conflict. "All right, Captain Mitchell, things that make you proud of your family. What do you think?" Jake had gripped the podium, his knuckles white against the dark wood. Their acceptance, he had answered, his voice strong but carrying an undertone that made Steve pause. The answer was number 4 on the board, worth 12 points. The Mitchell family celebrated, but Jake hadn't tooed from the microphone. He was staring at his father with an expression that carried the weight of years of hidden truth. Jake, Steve had said, approaching the podium, acceptance. That's a beautiful answer. Your family accepting of everyone? That's when it happened. Jake looked directly at Steve, then at his father, then back at Steve. When he spoke, his voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been living a double life. Mr. Harvey, I hope so, because I've been hiding something from my father for 8 years. And I don't know if a military hero can accept having a gay son. The words hit the studio like an explosion. General Mitchell's face went through a series of emotions so quickly it was like watching someone's entire worldview shift in real time. The studio audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front row brought their hands to their mouths. Jake, General Mitchell said, his voice carrying 35 years of military command, but trembling with something much more vulnerable. Are you telling me you're homosexual? Jake turned to face his father fully, tears already streaming down his face. Yes, sir. I have been my entire adult life. I've been terrified to tell you because I know how the military used to feel about people like me. I know what your generation was taught. The silence that followed was deafening. Steve Harvey had witnessed countless emotional moments over his career, but this was different. This was a son risking everything to tell his father a truth that could either destroy their relationship or transform it completely. Behind the scenes, a producer made a decision that would define this moment forever. Keep the cameras rolling. Let America witness what real courage looks like. Jake, General Mitchell said, stepping closer to his son, how long have you been carrying this secret? Since before I enlisted, sir. 8 years of pretending to be someone I'm not because I was afraid of disappointing you. General Mitchell's expression had completely transformed. The military bearing was still there, but it was now combined with something much more personal, much more paternal. Son, look at me. Jake met his father's eyes. In 35 years of military service, do you know what I learned about courage? What's that, sir? Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is doing what's right, even when you're terrified, and standing up here in front of all these people, telling your truth when you don't know how it will be received. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. The studio audience was beginning to react, but General Mitchell held up his hand for silence. Jake, I need you to understand something. You are my son. You are a decorated officer. You have served your country with distinction. Who you love doesn't change any of that. Jake's composure shattered completely. Dad, I was so scared you'd be ashamed of me. Ashamed? General Mitchell's voice grew stronger. Son, I have never been more proud of you than I am right now. But he wasn't finished. General Mitchell turned to address the entire studio, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making important speeches. Ladies and gentlemen, my son just taught me something about courage that 35 years in the military couldn't teach me. He taught me that the most difficult battles aren't fought on foreign soil. They're fought in the human heart. The applause that began was unlike anything typically heard in a game show studio. It wasn't entertainment applause, it was recognition of something profound, something that transcended television. But General Mitchell held up his hand again. Jake, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. What's that, Dad? I've known. The words hung in the studio air like smoke from a surprise firework. What do you mean you've known? Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Son, I've been watching you your entire life. I've seen how careful you are about relationships, how you deflect questions about dating, how you light up when you talk about your friend David, but call him just a buddy." Jake's eyes widened in shock. "I've been waiting 8 years for you to trust me enough to tell me the truth." The studio was completely silent now. This wasn't just a coming out story. This was a father who had been waiting patiently for his son to feel safe enough to be honest. "Dad, if you knew, why didn't you say something?" General Mitchell smiled, and for the first time since the conversation began, it reached his eyes. "Because some truths have to be offered, not demanded. I wanted you to tell me when you were ready, not when I forced it out of you." That's when Steve Harvey did something that broke every rule of television production. He stepped between father and son and addressed them both. "General Mitchell, Captain Mitchell, I need to ask you both something. Can I call some people? Can I share this moment with some folks who need to hear it?" Both men nodded, not sure what Steve had in mind. Steve pulled out his cell phone and, without asking permission from producers, started making calls. "Colonel Sarah Williams, this is Steve Harvey. I have a decorated general here and his gay son. I think some of your LGBTQ military folks need to hear this conversation." The call was brief, but impactful. Within minutes, Steve had connected the studio to a conference call with current and former military personnel who had struggled with similar issues. Then General Mitchell came a voice through the phone speaker. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos, retired Air Force. I want to thank you for what you just said. I spent 20 years hiding who I was." "Colonel Santos," General Mitchell replied, "thank you for your service. All of your service, including the service of being true to yourself." What followed was a series of calls from military personnel, both active and retired, sharing their stories, their struggles, and their gratitude for seeing a decorated general publicly support his gay son. But perhaps the most powerful call came from Master Sergeant David Chen. "Captain Mitchell," he said, "this is Master Sergeant David Chen. I want you to know that your courage today just made it easier for thousands of LGBTQ service members to serve openly." Jake was sobbing now, but they were tears of relief, not shame. "Sergeant Chen, thank you. I never thought my truth could help anyone else." "Sir, truth always helps. Your father just showed the military community what real leadership looks like." The episode, when it aired 6 weeks later, became a watershed moment for LGBTQ military personnel and their families. The Pentagon reported a significant increase in service members seeking support through official channels rather than suffering in silence. Military family support groups across the country began incorporating the episode into their training programs. Most importantly, Jake's story sparked conversations in military families that had been waiting years to happen. Jake and David, who had been together for 4 years, were finally able to be open about their relationship. General Mitchell not only attended their wedding 6 months later, but walked Jake down the aisle wearing his dress uniform with every medal he'd earned. The speech he gave at the reception became legendary in military circles. "I spent 35 years learning how to lead soldiers into battle. Today, my son taught me how to lead with love." Steve Harvey learned something that day that changed how he approaches every person who steps onto his stage. He learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with words. Not with force, but with acceptance. The conversation between General Mitchell and Captain Mitchell became required viewing at several military academies, not as entertainment, but as an example of what real courage and leadership look like. General Mitchell became an advocate for LGBTQ military personnel, speaking at conferences and working with policymakers to ensure that all service members could serve with dignity. Jake continued his military career, eventually earning his own promotion to major and became a mentor for other LGBTQ service members. The relationship between father and son, which had been strained by years of hidden truth, became stronger than ever. Steve Harvey still keeps a photo on his desk from Jake and David's wedding. It shows General Mitchell pinning a boutonniere on Jake's uniform while David stands beside them, all three men smiling with the kind of joy that comes from living authentically. The note attached reads, "Mr. Harvey, thank you for giving us the courage to choose love over fear." The general's secret was that he already knew, and love was waiting all along. Because sometimes the most decorated heroes are the ones who fight for acceptance rather than territory. Sometimes courage looks like a son telling his truth and a father choosing love over tradition. And sometimes a game show can become the place where families learn that the most important victory is the one that brings people closer together. The general's secret wasn't his son's sexuality. The general's secret was that love had been waiting there all along, patient and unconditional, ready to embrace whatever truth his son was brave enough to share. That's not just good television, that's good humanity. And that's a lesson worth more than any medal could ever represent.